Welcome, adventurers. It is finally summer, and although I do love the heat, I will admit that fall has got to be the best time of the year. The cool air, the crisp leaves, the hot apple cider, and of course, the annual rewatching of Hocus Pocus. That's right, today we're talking about The Witch. Welcome to Rebel Then King. Today we're talking about the late-night magical scholar of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Witch. Witches are an intelligence-based spellcaster with training in simple weapons. They have no armor proficiency and just 6 hit points per level. Pretty typical squishy caster. They're trained into a number of skills equal to 3 plus their intelligence modifier, and their subclass system is called patrons. Patrons are sort of a magical being. You go to them for guidance, and they grant you spell casting abilities. I will admit, after reading through the rules on the witch and even playing alongside a witch for almost 2 years, I sometimes kind of find myself asking, Witch, what is it that you would say that you do exactly? Let's try to find that out now. Well, the first thing that witches do is they get a familiar. This is a core feature of the class. They don't have to pick it up as a class feat. They don't have to take an ancestry that will give them an ancestry feat to gain a familiar. They just get one. Not only that, but their familiars have 3 abilities rather than the typical 2. And remember that these abilities can be either familiar abilities or master abilities, so you can build out a pretty powerful familiar, or use all the abilities to make yourself pretty powerful, or a mixture of both. For example, if you wanted a really powerful familiar, you could consider giving them a flying speed with the flying ability, manual dexterity so they can grab things, and speech so they can talk to you. This means you could have a familiar that you can command to like fly over a wall, grab something, come back, give you that thing, and tell you all about what they saw on the other side of the wall. That could be really powerful in exploration. You could also sync all of these familiar abilities into making you, yourself, the witch, more powerful. For example, you could use the ambassador ability, giving you a bonus to make an impression. You could go with partner in crime. That will make you a little bit better at thievery and deception. And then you could also use the familiar focus master ability. This will let you refocus to regain a focus point for only 2 actions rather than 10 minutes, though you do only get to use this once per day. So yeah, overall, this is a pretty decent feature that all witches have access to. You can gain a powerful little friend, or you can have that little friend mostly help you out. Either way, or even a mixture of both, works out pretty well. Witches also have a somewhat distinguishing feature called Hex Cantrips. I say somewhat distinguishing because they are pretty similar to the Bard's composition cantrips. They're both kind of meant to be sustained, both provide some buffing abilities. Though the Witch's Hex Cantrips do focus a little bit more on a broad spectrum of both buffs, debuffs, persistent damage, so I suppose that is somewhat unique. A big difference between the composition cantrips of the Bard and the Hex Cantrips of the Witch is what happens if you start, stop, and then continue these spells. As a Bard using Inspire Courage, you can do that in round 1 and you grant all of your allies and yourself a nice buff. Round 2, let's say you don't have enough actions, so you don't continue that cantrip. That's fine. On round 3, you go and you Inspire Courage again, and guess what? Everybody gets that same buff. Great. As a witch using Hex Cantrips, it will work differently. First of all, the Hex Cantrips are single target focused. They're not group effects. And when the spell ends with a Hex Cantrip, that target is immune to the effects of the cantrip for a minute. So, to use an example, you might be a Fervor Witch with the Stoke the Heart Hex Cantrip that grants some additional damage to strikes. Round 1, you cast that on your Barbarian. Round 2, you don't have enough actions, and you don't cast it on the Barbarian. Round 3, you can cast Stoke the Heart again, but you can't do it on that Barbarian character. That is difficult to work around. You really do want to be sustaining these hex cantrips from round to round to round, which is why witches are given a feat called Cackle. Yes, the witches can cackle. Now this is a focus spell. It costs 1 focus point, and it allows you to sustain a spell for a free action. So in that example from before, on round 2, let's say you need to move and cast a 2-action spell. Well, you can also cackle, because cackle is a free action that allows you to sustain that hex cantrip so that the target is not immune after it ends. That's pretty nice. However, cackle is a class feat, not a core feature, meaning you won't be able to get this until level 2, and not all witches will even pick it up necessarily. This brings me to what I propose as a homebrew rule to help fix the witch just a little bit. Witches should be able to cackle for free. By that, I mean to say that cackle should be given for free to all witches at level 1. It should be a core class feature, not that it is totally free as an action. It still costs a focus point. It is so in the DNA of these hex cantrips that they are sustained that not giving a witch cackle is a bit of a disservice. I would say go ahead and leave the cackle feat, allowing a witch to gain 2 focus points so that they can cackle twice. That could be really powerful too. Maybe a slight saving grace of these hex cantrips is your ability to learn some hexes. Now, hexes are not hex cantrips. We'll talk about that difference in a minute, but basically you pick up hexes through a class feat called Basic Lessons. You go to your benefactor for some guidance, you take a lesson, you learn a new spell. All right, so let's talk about hexes versus hex cantrips. Well, first of all, they are both spells. They both have the hex trait. This means you can only cast one of them per round. Where they differ is that a hex cantrip is a cantrip. You can cast it as many times as you want, aside from that whole 1 per round thing I just talked about. A hex, however, is a focus spell, meaning you can only cast it when you have a focus point, and the whole rules of the 10-minute refocusing apply here. This means that you're not going to use your hex cantrips and your hexes together, so you're not really adding power, but you are adding some versatility to what you can do. And this leads me to another homebrew rule that I would suggest for the witch. Let them cast multiple hexes in a round. Use your hex cantrip, start up your hex, the focus spell hex, and use them both. I think this would finally bring the witch a unique, distinguished, really fun playstyle that frankly it kind of lacks right now. Just imagine being in the middle of combat and waving with one hand while cackling and giving the evil eye to debuff an enemy. Meanwhile, with the other hand, you are waving and you are buffing an ally. You can kind of be this like center of the maelstrom. You can just like revel in all the glory and all the chaos that's swirling around you. That would be really unique. That would be really fun. That would make me say, aha, I want to play as a witch. Okay, so witches have enhanced familiars, which are nice, but they're not game changers, I wouldn't say. We talked about the hexes and the hex cantrips and how they kind of need some homebrew rules. Well, what else does the witch have going for it? According to some, they've got, some of the worst feats in the game. I won't go through all the feats, but again, there's Cackle, which is great, but really is a feat tax and should be offered for free. You've got Wart Witch, where you swap your familiar for a leshy familiar. Is that really worth it? To me, it's not. You've got the 2 kind of confusing melee, Living Hair and Eldritch Nails, when you don't really want to be doing melee combat and you could be using a weapon instead. Eldritch Nails, I will say, has a little almost magus in it where you can inscribe the nails with runes and you can actually cast hexes through them. So that's kind of cool, but I think overall the witch feats, kind of like witches in a lot of children's books, are they're pretty ugly. But hey, it looks like according to the remaster, which I finally caught up on, the hair and nails will be bundled into a single feat, so maybe it will now be worth it. So I suppose there we have it. I will admit, rules as written, I find it a little hard to get excited by the witch. I tend to look at them and think, well, another class does this better, Bard. But, you know, I think with the proposed homebrew rules, of giving them Cackle for free, letting them use multiple hexes in a turn, it could be pretty cool. And maybe some of those kinds of changes could be coming in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition remake. Nope. Remaster. That's the word. So with some modifications, the Witch could be really cool, but rules as written, I'm going to have to give them a pretty low score of just 4 out of 10 uneaten bowls of candy corn left over at the end of your Halloween party. Seriously, who likes that stuff? But have any of you had some good success with the Witch? Did you find it to be more useful than the Bard or the Wizard? If so, I'm open to hearing about it. Let me know in the comments. Until then, just keep on cackling on, because it's kind of all you got right now, Witch.